Hi, hello everyone in the audience. Good to have you here. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Got a good crowd today, so welcome everyone. Start with adopting an agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And Vaughn seconds. We got Laura taking over now, scribe and everything, so congratulations and welcome. Glad to have you in the role. Before we vote on the motion, I want to add board discussion at the end because I just want to go through some calendar items for December and January just so we can talk about big picture.
So I'll amend my motion to add
Fine.
discussion.
Will you amend your second?
I'll amend.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're good to go. First off, action item, Steve, we got a couple of agenda items.
And just,
Or motion, sorry.
Mary Ann's on the phone too. She's
Yes.
just, so we do have 5.
And I'm going to let Susan and Susanna brief you on the service area budgets.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, are we doing, you have comment?
If we want to start with owner comment, I'll be happy to take owner comments. The way we normally do them at workshops is it's on the topics we have, but if any owner wants to make comment, please come on up. We'll be glad to take owner comment.
You might need to.
Yeah, just back up. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Please come on up.
Hi, I'm not sure this is really on topic or not. My name's Steve North, it's 1130 Tapestry Drive. I'm going to start a story about pickleball. Maybe a continuing story, but I want to get it going. Everybody knows pickleball. It's played on a badminton court, 20 by 44. The trends right now in pickleball that it's the fastest growing sport in the United States. Right now, there's, according to sports and fitness industry, there's a 3.1 million players, increase of 12% over last year. Male-female breakdowns, pretty much 60 or 70-40 male to female. A little more casual players in the female rather than male. And it's an age group. The age groups go from 6 to 7 is 18.5% are in 6 to 17 age group. In 18 to 34 age group, it's 11.7%. And then up you go to 55 to 64, it's 7.7. If you take the 55 and over together, it's approximately 13% of the casual participants. So it's a very broad age group appeal. Right now in Celebration, we have 150 members that are registered and apt to play. That doesn't mean they're all necessarily Celebration residents or whatever. Currently, the club rents the Georgetown Clubhouse court there that they have, and we put up 4 temporary courts for each play on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday mornings, and also Saturday mornings, plus Wednesday afternoons and Sunday afternoons. It's really not uncommon to have 20 to 35 players playing. Now, with only 4 courts, you're going to have 16 players playing at a time, so people have to wait to play. In addition, what happens is not just the waiting for play, it doesn't allow new players to join in, because a lot of the newer players are intimidated because they can't come in and have a court to play, to practice, or whatever, to learn how to play. But quite often they're fully occupied. So I think we have a need, really, a very bad need for permanent courts within Celebration. And this would be to meet the need for current pickleball play within Celebration, also to encourage more participation, provide more courts that allow play to be segregated by skill level. Skill level is typically 1 through 5. Most recreational players typically hover around 3. But there are some players in our area that play in 4.5 area. But people just coming in feel very intimidated by coming in and seeing it's 3 or 4 player. And what's nice about pickleball, it allows different skill levels to play together. And you can very much ramp up very quickly to play, but it takes a while to build up to get to the point where you play competitively. We now have about 6 to 8 people that regularly participate in tournaments. This weekend, we had 6 players play in Winter Garden. They had 394 people playing in Winter Garden this past weekend for tournaments. 6 of those players were representing Celebration. So you can imagine new players coming in, it's going to be very difficult to play with those kinds of players. So having more courts will allow us to bring in beginners, be able to have more ad hoc play because the courts will be permanent rather than just set up during specific times. Also allow for beginner training for the new players. So getting Celebration into pickleball, I believe at least a minimum of 6 to 8 permanent courts should be constructed as soon as possible, with provisions to have additional 6 to 8 built based on demand. The reason I think you'll have to allow additional 6 to 8 to be built close by, because this is a social game. You need to have all courts in close proximity because players rotate amongst courts as they come off court and play in a new game. Also, they should be built adjacent to parking and also restroom facilities. Possible locations are obviously the Civic Corridor, near the new restrooms, or the K-8 on the school's abandoned tennis courts. Alternative sites may be appropriate as well, if they allow for initial court placement and expansion. So what are really the costs to do this? Some of the estimates that provided on a place called Pickleball Central, they indicate that a new court construction for like community facilities, an 8-court complex with fencing but with no lights, between $110,000 and $150,000. An 8-court complex with fencing, lighting, and stadium seating, approximately $300,000 and up. So we're not talking about tremendous expense here. We're talking about something that's a modest expense, it's reasonable, something to be done fairly soon, and we have the ground to do this. As is aligned with our cornerstones within Celebration. 2 primary cornerstones of the community are our sense of community. Pickleball is a very social sport which allows for interaction with our friends and neighbors. Also focus on health. Pickleball is an excellent source of exercise really for all ages. So in summary, the time really is now for pickleball courts in Celebration. So I'd like you to consider this for near-term construction. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just follow up on that. Vanessa and I were at the Recreation Committee. I think you were there, and Tim Hannon also spoke. The reason I said I wanted to go through calendar items as the new item 6 here is I want to dedicate a workshop probably in January to dealing with the Parks and Facilities Plan expansion, of which I think every one of us here know that pickleball is high on that. So it's been heard, it's not forgotten, and I actually want to, by the time we're done today, say, okay, here's a meeting that we're going to dedicate to it, and then you can come and participate in that meeting too. At the end of the day, we got Lot D. I mean, Vaughn has spoken to the, pardon?
You have 0 credits left. Already?
Vaughn is the treasurer and trying to take as much money from me as humanly possible. Okay.
All right, thank
We
you.
do know where we have a space, and the school is not going to work because they,
There's a lot of hoops to jump.
there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and we will never get there.
Yeah, my concern has been, like a year, we talked about surveys, we talked about this thing, and this has been discussed. The pickleball group actually started in 2016. So the pickleball's been active since 2016. They've been talking about trying to get permanent courts since then. We're basically almost 4 years into this, and we're still not seeing any progress. So I would like to see some.
Brian, can I add to that? There's, as the master plan, the report was initially given at the meeting in October to the community. But the final master plan had just the last tweaks were just presented to me on Friday. Mr. Anderson, as our liaison for master plan, has a copy of that as of today, just to give it one last look over. And then I think it's done, so it should be up by the end of this week on the website. But the CROA board has a challenge of having about 5 or 6 to 10 different projects that have floated to the top. And then they have what their revenue streams are coming in. So that workshop in January is going to be discussed, how you prioritize those items and what goes first. So those that are watching at home that are the croquet fans or the dog park light fans, all of those things are going to come into question as we move forward.
Agreed, but that's the workshop. We need to just have and get it
Yeah,
moving.
the top 5 items of those, some of them were not really, not within scope. They were parking issues, there were things at community center, and there's art center. A lot of those things are high ticket items and things that are out of scope for CROA. So of those top 5, pickleball should really come to the top. So I don't think it's among 10, it's probably among 2. So and it's a low ticket item, it's something that can be done very short term, it's not complicated. I mean, paving something, we're not talking about putting electrical in it, it's not required to have lights initially. So it can be done short term, so
Okay.
excited to get it done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mike, what's
go ahead.
what's the dimensions? Can we get the dimensions that we?
I have
Has
everything.
everything.
Yeah, the pickleball group has been communicating with me for quite some time on
But
what it
like you
looks
said, 2016 is when I was on the board last time, and we had the demand then, so it's there.
A court is 20 by 44, it's roughly 1/3 the square footage of a tennis court.
You can fit, basically you can fit 3 in one,
You can do
correct?
4, 2 on each side.
2 on
Yep.
each side, okay.
Well, you need to make sure there's sufficient space around the outside. For instance, we use a single court at Georgetown, a single tennis court, where we set up 4 on there. And we only do that because there's sufficient space around the outside of the court. So, you can probably figure maybe 1/3 on roughly the same square
And if you're starting from scratch, they're not gonna look like tennis courts, because they're gonna be multiple
They're
pickleball
pickleball,
courts.
yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Not lost on us, I promise you. We got through the athletic fields.
Yeah.
Come on back up. Or any other public comments first? Okay, come on up.
Okay, good morning again.
Morning again.
First, I want to start by introducing you to Tim Prescott. He has been under operations for a while, the maintenance lead. He will be the new service area manager. He has a lot of experience with vendors and project management with Todd, so we're really excited to have him move into that position.
And what will your new job be?
I will be community standards manager, which I did several years ago, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm excited for the change. We're excited to have Tim. So we're here together today.
Well, I had congratulated Laura before
Yes.
in her new role, and congratulations to both of you. We
Yep.
think it's great
Thank you so
news and
much.
look forward to going forward.
Excellent. So, first agenda item is the service area budgets. The first one is Parkview Townhomes. There is no increase in assessment this year. We met with the Parkview Service Area Committee. We did some revisions to the funding, the budget plan. They specifically did not want to increase this year because they had seen an increase steadily over time. And so we made some adjustments together with the committee, and this is the proposed budget with no change.
This is signed off by their service area committee, and they've looked at reserves, they've looked at everything, and they're
Yes,
happy.
Sure have.
Okay?
When do you anticipate a new roof for those units?
I believe it's scheduled, the painting. Uh-huh.
I'm
We
sorry,
might have
I
moved
couldn't hear
back,
you.
though.
2021.
2021, 2022. We split it in pieces, like Susanna did with the painting.
Does the reserve fund
I believe it's that.
anticipate that?
Yes.
And are we properly funded in that reserve plan?
Yes, actually, the roofs got moved back to 2022 and 23.
That's what I
Yes.
thought, it got moved back.
Yeah, we did, and we talked about that with the committee, so they're aware. But we have a good budget in there for roof repairs until then.
Okay. Let's do A, B, and C together. So let's, or if that's all right with everybody on board, so let's talk about B and C too.
Okay, B is Spring Lake Townhome Service Area Budget. So the original budget and proposed, in the letter that we sent to homeowners, back when we did these back in September and October, had a $15 increase. And then, of course, we had the meeting, we talked about changing landscapers. Some homeowners at the meeting had talked about the funding plan and how they felt like the number was increasing over time, and they didn't feel like it was right to kind of stick the guy at the end 10 years down the road with more assessments than they were paying now. So what we did is we went to the funding plan, we took an average, we averaged out the contributions, and we worked on some of the numbers to bring the increase down to $6.60 of increase in 2020, or a 2.8% increase.
And where do we stand with the Yellowstone decisions?
Okay, so for right now, we are gathering the information on the matrix that the owners asked for at the meeting. It included manpower, it included more information. I sent all that out to all four landscapers. They needed a little more time to put it together. We're working on that today, in the next couple days, and we're gonna put that together to send to the owners. And then we have the resolutions for the board meeting on the service areas, putting those together. And so our hope is in January, we can set up those meetings, the homeowners can vote to have a service area put together, and then they can take an active interest on where they want that landscaping to go. As far as 2020 budget goes, it will stay with Yellowstone at the moment.
So the anticipation right now is Yellowstone for the year at the prices that were there before, and if a transition is made, that'll occur during the year
Yes.
based upon feedback from the residents.
Exactly.
Okay? Comments?
You know, Mike, this one's open over here.
There you go.
Mike Jackson, 1511 Castile today.
Yes.
Debbie
Homeless
kicked,
the rest of the
Debbie
time.
kicked me out. Quick comment on pickleball, I'm gonna back up, just a quick comment on pickleball, not to belabor it, but the group has got involved with the Boys and Girls Club and we donated 3 older nets. We bought new nets. We're now teaching the kids at the Boys and Girls Club. We had about 25, 30 kids there last week, and we'll be there again on Tuesday. So Tuesday nights we go there and are teaching the kids pickleball, so we're reaching out to other areas. Spring Lake, so the budget and everything, we'll be seeing where that goes. We have the meeting scheduled for December 12th.
That'll be for the opt-out of the service area for the
Yep.
gardens.
Yeah, and I think couple comments. One, I know you said that if your vote's been put in, it still counts. I think should make people aware that if they want to change their vote, because new information's coming in, they can do that.
Yes.
I think we should make them aware of that. The communication really didn't say that. It was like,
Okay.
if your vote's in, you're done, and we'll count your vote.
Well, in other words, your vote's not discarded if we move the meeting, but we'll be sending out a new ballot
Okay,
for
good.
everyone, and
Great.
we'll make sure that that's
Perfect.
clear, that you can change your vote if you like.
Perfect. And then obviously, we're going to get some information on the qualitative side of the RFP, and we'll take a look at that when that matrix comes. I just wanted to put this out there, and this is my opinion. That will indicate something as to the quality of the people that you have talked to. I understand that. As I've reflected on and thought about it more, Yellowstone came in at $127 a household, and Omegascape, who you recommended, was $131. So they're right in the ballpark. They're a little cheaper, actually. We know what we have with Yellowstone. It's the best we've had. We've changed 4 times. Yellowstone still is a vendor that we have in the community in a big way with our parks. I don't know what the qualitative information is going to be that comes back, but it's hard for me to imagine it would override our experience with Yellowstone that we have personally. The other information is going to be obviously biased because we're getting it from that person unless we really get to some customers and so on. So I'm thinking that we're better off to stay with Yellowstone, my opinion. Maybe only go for a year contract, 1.5 years and out, or hold them real tight. But it seems like Yellowstone knows the property. They've got people in place. Any other company's going to have to hire, learn the property. There's going to be all kinds of startup problems. It's going to be hard to hire in this environment. We're a larger percentage of Yellowstone's business, I'm sure, than we would be of Omegascapes or anybody else. And theoretically, we should have some leverage with them because they have a pretty cush job with the parks, which are pretty easy to do, right? So it seems like all logic and strategy indicates to me that that should be our preferred vendor, or our stalking horse, at least going into this. I know we need to go through the process yet, but I just wanted to get that on the table and express my opinion.
Thank you.
That's it.
It's good feedback. So, speaking of the gardens, number C is the service area. Their budget is a rollover from last year, so there's no increase in assessments. And the budget reflects Yellowstone's cost the year before.
Okay, and everybody who has given you feedback is happy with this approach right now and ready to roll forward?
Well, we didn't send the budget as an e-blast to everybody.
But you haven't had people
We-
complaining right
We
now?
have had one email in particular that says we shouldn't be going with Yellowstone anymore.
Yeah, but
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that one, yeah.
that one.
But just to answer your
Well,
question.
no,
there has been, yeah.
there has been the one. There's one person who very adamant that, well, doesn't want anything sprayed.
No, I
is really.
actually haven't received a lot of correspondence about the budget since that meeting, some questions about the garden vote. I have received, so we've been trying to communicate that out. We'll be sending a mail out, but nothing otherwise.
Okay. Motion to approve items 1A, B, and C?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any board comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Mary Ann just said aye too, I could hear her quietly.
Let's do
No, I didn't
repair the
understand.
destructive testing by Empire Works.
Okay, so this is a motion, if you recall, we recently approved the destructive testing at a unit in North Village with Delta Engineering, because they've been having multiple leaks, and the roofers weren't able to determine what the cause was, so the lawyer's recommendation was to pull in the engineer that did the roof report and have them do an assessment of the home and figure this out. So the engineers basically do the evaluation, they're kind of like the, the brains investigative part of it. And they work with a construction company that does the actual labor. They take apart the materials, put it back together. Their scope, and I asked the attorney about this because their scope looks very much the same like Delta's, but what they do is they model their scope after the engineer because they're working in harmony for the same goal, and they'll actually do the labor force of it. So Empire Works is that company, they'll be working with Delta on that same project at North Village.
Is it just on the roof, or is it gonna be maybe where there's painted areas that they have to repaint?
Well, they're gonna look inside, they're gonna look outside. There's been some question about the chimney. There's also, the
Oh.
owners pointed out some areas underneath the decking. So I imagine they're gonna, and she's had leaks in the garage. So I imagine there's gonna be a lot of in and out, evaluation to see what's the
Just one about
cause of it.
patchwork painting, if it's gonna look crappier or.
Well, we'll definitely have the correct paint available, to do any kind of work that needs to. They're also, I believe Charleston's due for painting next year possibly, so,
And this has been coordinated with the legal.
yes. Sure
Okay.
has.
And this is the unit on the end, correct? The one that's been having all the problems? Just doing it
With the
okay.
tarp on at
Yeah.
the moment, yes.
Okay. Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. Vaughn, second. Any comments from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Perfect, passes unanimously.
Okay, so action item number 3 is KWA Engineers. This is the Blue Sage infamous roof replacement that we've been working on all year. We, at the last board meeting, were ready to move ahead, and when the engineer was approved, we sent it to the lawyer, general counsel, and they've had some concerns about the contract and the liability clauses, and so that was disregarded. We had to look for a new engineer. KWA, we used, I know Todd used with the water tower. They also helped us in the beginning stages with the roof construction, defect case. Basically, anybody else that we've tried to use, they don't have adequate insurance, the contracts, aren't approved by the attorney. There's not a lot of roof engineers out there, and we do have experience with KWA, and their price is reasonable, so it fits within the budget for Blue Sage. And again, this is when we're just doing the townhomes. So
Perfect.
I'm hoping, I'll ask the owners, and if they're in favor, we'll try to get the roofs on before Christmas.
Okay, for the sake of the audience, the previous firm was willing to give us a contract that stated they were responsible for none of their work or anything that might go right or wrong, which we just didn't think was a great contract. So,
went
motion
into
to
business.
approve.
Yeah, I
is
would
that-
also point out it was a contract for $10,000 more.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
than
this is a
what am I
big,
right
this is a
about?
lot cheaper.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Oh, there you go.
Okay,
Oh,
we
you
got
did
a
Mary
yes
Ann.
from Mary Ann and a second from Jackson. Any board comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Brian, can I just add, Susanna mentioned the water tower, and at the CJC meeting last week, a question came up about the water tower. Todd's forwarded that scope from the engineer from KWA to the folks at TCC that wanted to review it also. And then he's worked on getting the quotes cleaned up a little bit. So that information's sitting with TCC right now. None of it's mission critical to where the water tower is going to fall over at any point in time. So we want to make sure we're doing it right. That's why we haven't moved forward with the water tower yet.
And the water tower is not a CROA
It's a
expense,
CJC.
or it's CJC, but Vaughn, being on the board, had them do some engineering work before they started doing patchwork work, and there were things that were found that needed to be done for proper long-term care, so it's a good answer. That it's a CJC budget item.
Right.
So thanks for the update. Okay, any other items before we go to the 2020 election? Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Alan.
Eileen Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive, and I'd really just like to say that I really think that the board and management is, to my opinion, really on the right track in terms of dealing with the service areas, which, as I'm sure my husband may bring up later, is certainly a question that I plan on asking any new candidates for the board, because I want to see this being continued.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Next item,
Actually, I have a quick
ahead.
question before you leave. And my reason for asking is I know Parkview now has a service area committee. How many service area committees have been created now? I know we have South Village.
Yes, so Parkview was written into the charter,
Right.
and then Oak Pond is about to form. We're actually sending out their ballot today, and we'll have a meeting in December for them to set up theirs. And then, hopefully, if we get we'll get the resolution passed for Spring Lake and Gardens, that's 2 service areas,
Right.
and the vote will be in January, so.
Okay.
At the moment, just 2, but 3 in December, and
But
maybe even more in
there's
January.
forward momentum
Yes,
on it.
there
And
sure
I'd
is.
hope, as you take over, that would be something that you would initiate too. I think it's something that, that definitely helps the board when we know that the residents are involved in the decision-making and at least have some input in what's important to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, as we get ready to go to the next item, which is the 2020 election process, Gerald Barr actually had brought this up as an email and spoke at the last, I think it was workshop. And so what I'd like to do is start with Steve just giving us a overview of the whole election process and the way it's kind of worked, even big picture dates or something that you got. And then I want to open it up for public comments and an open board discussion. We've got 4 seats that are coming up in this next cycle, and what is the best way to proceed?
Sure. Our first date, milestone date coming up is our call for candidacy, and that'll be Friday, December 6th when the call for candidacy is announced. And then it lasts for 1 month, so the end of the call for candidacy is January 6th for all eligibility. And then everything will be posted on the website by January 7th. And so then we will have the actual election timeframe will run through the polls open for the community-wide February 3rd. And then tabulation of the voting is on Tuesday, March 3rd. And the polls close at 5:30 on March 3rd. Then after everything is counted on March 3rd, we'll have our annual meeting on March 4th for the announcements of the new candidates. Now, we have some forums that come up in February. As of this time, there has not been a date set or a moderator picked, and I know one of the points that Mr. Barr brought up and he's going to be discussing this morning is having an impartial moderator and asking important questions. So typically, I have selected the moderator. I know that there's been some conversation if the board would like to select a moderator. I would like to caution, though, there's 4 seats that are open, so if you're going to pick a moderator, it probably should be the 3 that are not up for re-election that are involved in that process, just so that it's fair and transparent part of that process. And then when it comes to the actual questions that are done, I have a list of stock questions, and then we do an all-call to the community, and we ask residents to submit questions. Those questions are given to the moderator, along with the stock questions. We also have an opportunity at the meeting for residents to submit questions at that meeting. Those are taken and they're handed to the moderator. At no time do I tell the moderator what questions to ask. It's completely up to the moderator at what they'd like to ask. Vanessa, I believe, has been a moderator in the past, and she can attest to that process.
Be totally neutral.
Yeah, so if there's anything else the board would like to see different, I would love to hear it.
Can you speak to how you looked at the questions, how you
Yeah.
chose questions?
I don't remember when I did it, but I have done it.
You did it 2 years ago, because I know it was when we were running.
Okay, well, there we go, 2 years ago. So, the whole process, Steve just sent me an email, and on the email was a list of all of the questions that have been asked in the past, questions that have been, that have not been asked, but are just, like he said, a stock question, things that have been submitted by other residents from the past. Some of the other things, there's always going to be your election hot buttons. Those usually come in from residents. Those are all submitted directly to CCMC. If you want to keep it totally neutral, perhaps you can have it sent right to the moderator. Whoever you've selected as the moderator can actually receive all of the questions. But it was totally neutral. I picked the questions, so if you didn't like them, I'm sorry, that was me. And I have heard feedback that they thought in some cases they were lollipop questions.
I like the one about our favorite food truck.
That was not mine.
that was
Yeah, wrong one, but good try. Smart Alec. So it was totally neutral, but the moderator is actually the one that selects the questions. So if there's any questions about the process, I'd be happy, I don't know.
So let's open it up to audience comments, and I'd like to do it around 2 things. How should the moderator be chosen? welcome any feedback there. And then how should questions be done? I mean, in fairness, Vaughn, myself, Jackson, and Kevin would all be up for reelection, so we certainly should not be involved in the process.
Steve, when you selected, because I know we've had Eric Oppegard, who was the president at the time that was not running for reelection. I was outgoing president. How have you selected the moderators in the past?
It's typically someone that has served in some portion of this volunteer process, and that's not currently on the board. And then someone that we feel has the experience to be able to keep the group from getting unruly and keep questions moving along and those types of things.
Comments from the audience? Please come on up.
Gerald Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. Number of comments. Number one, I don't believe it, these are obviously all my opinions. I don't believe that the moderator should be the only one choosing the questions. I believe we should have a committee perhaps of a moderator and 2 other people to review all the questions. Number 2, CCMC can certainly submit their whatever questions they have in the past, but I think there also should be an early solicitation of questions from the community. I think questions should be pointed, and as you can see, with our athletic fields and an expenditure of $6 million, whoever is on that board should have reasonable, fair, and wide-ranging judgment in what they're going to vote on, because this current board was left with a terrible white elephant. Those are my comments.
Do you have any thoughts on how the moderator should be selected? Do you care about the moderator?
Unfortunately, I really don't have an opinion. It should just be someone that's forthwith, that's going to ask, or that with 2 other people will pick out pointed questions that where the people will have to really answer, and people in the audience should be able to feel that those answers are the truth and not just some kind of platitudes.
Well, that would be, as a moderator, I'm just saying, I can't control how they answer. So, I mean, they're open-ended questions. You can only ask so much. What they say is up to them.
Obviously, but depending on the question, it determines the type of answer you're going to get.
I agree, because I think the forum was an hour and a half. Each of them, there's 2 of them in an hour and a half, right?
That's correct.
So I thought personally that we spent a lot of time in that hour and a half just talking about general things like Jerry was saying, it's like, I felt like we were wasting time on just the general overview. Yes, I want to see Celebration really look nice. I want to, make it a pretty place, and I don't want my assessments to go, all this general stuff, but I think we really do. I think the pointed questions are very important, and I thought we lost a lot of good questions to those general views of Celebration. I think we all want to see the place look better, but maybe do one question like that, then the rest of them, we go to some, specific things that we're having issues with in town at that time.
I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead.
Eileen Barr. One of the things about having 2 set forums, and it builds on Vaughn's point, about how much time you ask, good questions are asked, and you want a good answer. You want people to be able to answer. And there have been forums where we have had showing up 9 candidates, 10 candidates in an hour and a half forum. That leaves very little time. So perhaps either then it needs to be extended once it goes past a certain, over 6 or 7 or 8 candidates. I mean, we don't have any limit. I mean, anybody can show up, anybody can answer a question, everybody gets the same amount of time. So I would maybe think about being a little, liberal in case we really have a lot of candidates this time, either in extending a little longer session or having an extra session. Also, sometimes people can't make it, so you really do want to hear from everybody. The other thing is particularly on the questions that the community sends in, and there may not be time to get an answer. Perhaps consider having them submit all candidates, submitting their answer in writing and publishing it somewhere.
And I think the other point he had was good too, Jerry had, because if you just have a moderator, you can take away the bias that may be there in some way. Because I remember one moderator, it wasn't you.
Thank you.
One moderator, when the questions came up, the moderator paraphrased the question.
It was CCDD.
No, it was here.
It was here.
Oh, okay.
It was here. And they paraphrased the questions, and it was, that's kind of unfair. I mean, they should read the question as it is, because you have the ability to, change things or leave certain parts out of it. But yeah, it did happen there too, you're right. But I think it's a good idea maybe to have two or three people look at the questions and then make sure the questions are read in their entirety. I think it makes it more, it takes away any alleged bias on the part of the moderator.
Perhaps to help with that issue, you can actually, Jerry, you had mentioned having somebody work along with the moderator in the questions. Perhaps it can be totally neutral and the moderator isn't even the one coming up with the questions. The moderator is just doing that. They are strictly asking the questions. I would totally, as a moderator,
That'd be
that made me
great.
think, then I'm not being, then I truly am not being political. Then I am truly apolitical as a moderator.
I would actually enjoy it if the moderator only was a traffic cop. And if, in all honesty, if you had this many people, 8 or 9 people up there, it's a traffic cop just to make sure somebody doesn't filibuster and go through nonsense. At the end of the day, I would enjoy if this group out here almost came up with the questions. Meeting, we all know, there may be 4,000 homes in here, but we all know there are 30 or 40 homes that really understand what's going on. You can ask some hard questions, don't really bother me. I think it would have been actually more fun. When you get into the fields, when you get into the finances of the community, how you think about future assessments, how you think about the service areas, how you think about litigation and roofing areas. I mean, there could be some fascinating answers just to hear if somebody says, wow, is that an issue? Or, this is how I think about it, good or bad, and this is what we did, good or bad. But I mean, so there's a lot of it. I personally think taking the questions away from the moderator, getting, a good moderator to play traffic cop, and then having, I don't care, Eileen or Gerald, and you can pick 3 other people who understand the issues that have been going on and who are regulars. We see people who are regulars and know they are in tune with the hot button issues that are here today and will be here tomorrow. And with Island Village and everything else, there's a lot of them. So I'm kind of rambling, but welcome other thoughts from other board members.
Oh, I'm going to turn you up. Second, Mary Ann.
Okay,
Go ahead.
am I audible?
You're
You're good.
audible.
Okay, I like the idea of a committee of maybe 3, kind of vetting out, so to speak, the questions so that they're good, valid questions and not nonsense questions. And the other, and I shouldn't say nonsense, that was a little strong, but the other thing I wonder, has it ever been considered to have a moderator who truly, you want it to be a traffic cop, but if you have anyone at the podium as moderator who resides here, their internal bias, they won't be able to make that go away, because that's just the way psychology works, of having a moderator for hire, so to speak. You can probably find one that wouldn't be terribly expensive, but it would truly keep the moderator as a moderator, a timekeeper, almost like a parliamentarian of sorts. that ever been considered, or is that just like a terrible idea to all of you?
No, actually, we have some heads nodding in the audience too, so.
Has it ever been considered, or?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Consider it.
I
It's
would-
the right thing to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it would be tremendously expensive. I actually like Eileen's idea, if you're gonna have two meetings, go with two-hour meetings. I mean, it's not a lot of money. Divorce the process from CCMC or anybody else who's, could even be viewed as having a vested interest, so that it's viewed to be a purely independent item. It's recorded, then people can watch it, so that's good. Eileen, you wanna add?
One last statement, though, in response to your comment about the people in the audience. Unfortunately, most of the people in the audience are not considered neutral. I mean, most of us, have records, we're known.
I know, I've seen them online.
I want to Yeah, exactly.
Today's forum will be on pickleball.
But the thing that you have is understanding and knowledge that would help, because you participate in the process, because I think that's where there can be sometimes questions that are not necessarily applicable to what the board does. And yes, there's no one in the room right now who ever expresses an opinion.
Other comments from the
So
board?
that was my 2 cents, sorry.
I have one question regarding the questions. You did mention that there are stock questions, resident submitted questions, I guess by email or phone call, and then day of questions. How do you solicit the resident questions before the day of?
Through Friday Flash, and they usually are out there for 3 to 4 weeks prior to the forums.
Okay. And would it be beneficial to go ahead and request or solicit those at the same time as candidates? So that way it's all the same topic, it's all get your mind going and encourage those questions to come
I
out
like
soon.
that idea, because I do not like the day of. You and I watched somebody just going through the questions and putting the questions they wanted on top, literally.
And let's clarify.
It was not a
Okay.
CCMC person, it was a member from the audience that many people in this room know. And we're just sitting here and we're watching it, we're going, this is a flawed process. So I think that's a good idea. Call for candidates, call for questions, and then select 3 or 4 people. And at the end of the day, informed people who understand the issues of the town are the right people to have thinking about it. Because it's fair to ask us about pickleball, it's fair to ask us about financials, it's fair to ask about all those things.
So my takeaway is going to be,
Please come on up.
I thought I wasn't going to make any other comment because you've heard too much from me already, but Kevin read my mind when he said that at the time when we call for candidates, we should call for questions, and you read my mind that there should be no questions submitted with paper and fiddling around. This should be really organized.
All right, then.
And as a moderator, that would be appreciated, to not have to worry about that during the day, and have it submitted. But I do think if you have an email, a specific email to questions, that whoever that committee is, should actually receive those, the questions.
And before we go to Steve's comment, I think we have to then acknowledge that we're putting Vanessa, David, and Mary Ann in charge of structuring the election process, because 4 of us are going to be perceived as biased, because we could run, and our seats are up. So, I mean, I think it's just, you've got to have that type of a process.
and
Yes.
I think you need to,
That makes sense.
and I think you need to talk about whether you want to now give the power to those 3 to select the committee, or do you want to vote the committee in now at this meeting? Because December 6th, the questions will go out, and I think we need to state on there, no questions will be submitted day of forum. So get your questions in now, starting December 6th. And then I think we can take the questions all the way up to whenever that committee would like to meet to organize them and put their questions together for the forum.
Let's start with the moderator question first. Does everybody agree an independent moderator? Because, I mean, if we're talking 2 hours worth of time, twice 4 hours is not going to be a tremendous amount of money. Does the board agree that makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
Don,
absolutely.
you're comfortable?
And do you,
Mary Ann,
would
are
you
you
like,
comfortable with that?
Yes.
and I think it's important to know, would you like me to go out and try and find a moderator, or do you want the committee that you're gonna be appointing to look for a moderator?
I'd encourage the committee to be part of it.
Yeah.
Both,
Yeah, the
I mean.
committee should be a part of it, and that's not a difficult task. There are organizations that can help supply that.
Okay, so the first motion I'm gonna make and ask for a second on is we're gonna make a motion that we have an independent moderator for the 2 2-hour sessions. We'll make them 2 hours for Eileen's thing. And the 3 board members in the committee can figure out the best way to do it, working with CCMC as they might want. Second?
Second.
Got a second from Kevin? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes.
Aye.
Perfect, so that passes unanimously. So now let's go to the committee structure. My personal, and this is just one board member speaking, is I would just like to choose the darn committee. I mean, we'll never be accused of being perfectly fair, or we can charge do it as, I'm trying to figure out if 4 of us have an opinion on the committee, is it good or bad, or do we charge that to the 3 other people?
Probably best to let the 3 that are not running.
And we have precedent. Last year, we did ask Jack and Debbie to act as ombudsman for the election process. So we've done that before.
And do you encourage, I know PJ historically has assisted with the counting.
Counting.
Is this something that she may be interested in assisting with, part of that process, as somebody that's not on the board? I don't know.
I know
Just
she's
these are the
definitely
resources we
interested
have.
in, if you have the confidence in her moving forward with the voting again, which she's done a wonderful job. And Eileen, I think, has been her assistant with Debbie also for the last couple of years. I know she's definitely interested in continuing that. I have not talked to her about anything with the moderator at this point.
Debbie Jackson. Personally, I don't know, I'm not speaking for PJ, but I don't think we should, counting votes
That's a good
and then also being on it, I think you should just, no.
That's a great
I'm gonna say, I like
No,
diversity.
no,
You
no,
gotta
no.
do-
Yeah.
PJ in the group works
Yeah.
great. Let us
Yeah.
stay independent
We like to
of
just,
the.
yeah, I keep my ear, yeah.
Fair. That's a great point.
He listens to me.
That's not true. Let me get back up there, that's not true.
We all know the truth, Debbie.
Yeah.
So do we charge the 3 board members with striving to develop a small committee, or other ideas? I'm willing to listen to other ideas. Let's just agree on what we're agreeing on.
Well, I can't speak for David. Mary Ann, there you go.
Go ahead, Mary Ann.
Do you want to go first,
No,
Vanessa?
it's all you.
So I think that that would be the most expeditious, and it's a reasonable thing for the 3 of us to take charge of identifying and, speaking to potential committee members, asking people to volunteer, basically, with the mind that we're looking for people who are who have knowledge, but are not, they're gonna have to really commit, that they're not like they don't have an agenda, which we all have. Everybody has an agenda. Anybody who thinks they don't is naive. But I think that's the best way to do it. And as Jackson said, there's kind of some precedent there, so that would be my inclination.
What do you think about reaching out to some of our ARC and our Covenants Committee members or chairs for the committee, or do we want to reach out for the public? What are your thoughts?
If you're...
I'm just trying to, because you want somebody that knows the process.
Yes. So that because you want it, you don't want to take the time you might have to take to, I think that's a good idea. I'd be interested to hear what other people think, but I think
Yeah,
that's...
I'm just brainstorming. I just
efficient.
know that you want somebody that actually kind of is involved. I mean, obviously, people that attend the meetings would be,
Yes.
would be somebody that would be valuable.
What about a member from each
You want-
committee that we have, one person? and then all the interest would be.
My fear is, do the people on the committees actually understand the issues? I mean, there's some pretty darn complicated issues that there are people out here who understand, and I'm not sure people on ARC, and I don't mean this to come out wrong, there are people out here who are on covenants and stuff like that who know the issues very well, but I just don't want to end up with somebody who gets volunteered from some committee because they happen to have some time on their hand and they haven't really paid any attention to what's going on in the town. That's my worry.
How many individuals would you want to see on this committee? 3, 5? And the reason
Three
why.
is an optimal committee number.
Yeah, I think
So- I
for
was
something
thinking
that, yeah, I was
three.
What I
thinking, I
was-
was thinking 3.
What I was gonna go with is perhaps somebody that is involved in a committee, somebody that's not involved in a committee, and have just a diverse brainstorming group.
Well, yeah, the brainstorming, and then they need to be able to grab the questions and then make sure that we, that they're all accounted for.
Eileen?
Yeah, I have a suggestion. There are a number of people in this community, all of us know them, or we see them, who are really very, very knowledgeable, and I'd like to suggest that you put together an actual committee of 3, say, to do this work by the same way you do a task force, by asking, particularly at this point, who would be interested, looking at the names and saying, yes, I hear from that person, and I know that they know what's going on. And very often, they're not the people who come, because they just either don't have the time, or they watch it at home, or whatever.
I beat you, Jerry.
Jerry, you gotta be fast.
My suggestion, just use the 3 that are not, the committee. Only because once you start reaching out, you're gonna get a little bit of here and you're gonna get a little bit of there. You have no idea. Just leave, you are the ones that know what's going on right now. You should know what's, happening.
So you're
Somebody,
saying-
like you're saying, like you said before, somebody from the ARC or something like, they're going to be concentrating on that. You have the wide range of knowledge of what's gone on so far.
So
You know.
just to clarify, make sure I understand what you're saying that the 3 board members should be the people
I
that are
think that,
doing it.
personally, I think, yeah.
Wait, the 3 board members should be the committee or the people picking the committee?
No, they should be the committee. They should be the
As a
committee.
fellow board member, I'm uncomfortable with that because I would never want to be perceived as being biased for anyone either on or not on the board now. Does that make sense?
Okay, but you also know that as soon as you start reaching out, that is when you're going to get the you
What
are.
is Vanessa doing?
So as soon as you open that door, yeah, as soon as you open that door, you're gonna get, you're gonna have that problem.
Mary Ann,
Yep, Mary Ann?
do you think the fair compromise to that, and I'm trying to hide in the corner of an office building right now. Do you think the fair compromise to that is how the committee that's chosen, or volunteers, along with the 3 board members who are organizing this, sit down together to be the full committee? Because then you have the knowledge base that we can share, but we have kind of the input of the people who are not, would not appear to have, because that internal bias, that's actually a really serious thing for us
What-
to keep in consideration.
What I'd
But I
like,
think knowledge, go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
continue, Mary Ann, I'm sorry.
No, I'm good. I just think.
The only
that's
thing I want to,
my
okay, the only thing I want to
suggestion.
add to this, though, is we don't want to be in a situation where there's, somebody thinks, okay, certain people who are running got the questions and other people didn't. So there needs to be a, oh crap, that's a tough question, or that's an easy question, but everybody's hearing it at the same time. And I'm not accusing anybody of being bad, I'm accusing, this whole conversation is about perception. Okay, we'd like to have tough questions and perception and fairness.
The reality is, nobody ever saw the questions before. And I think that's the difference, is because literally the moderator did all of them. So none of the people that were on the panel ever saw any of the questions. They could guess based upon what the feel was of the group, but that's about it, so. Sorry, Jerry.
I would disagree with my colleague.
Eileen?
Debbie. Number one,
Smart move.
I don't, the celebration way is that everyone should be touchy-feely. And you don't want these questions to be touchy-feely because you want to get a true opinion from the people. To wit, number one, I would have no one on the committee who's on some other committees, because those committees are always structured that you should speak in one voice and be touchy-feely. Number two, I think that people from the community should really have the opportunity to review those questions with the board members. And I think you really ought to ask for candidates and look for people that want to volunteer to do this.
What about we just take the board out of the whole equation? Every board member, whether up for re-election or not, we appoint somebody tonight to choose the committee and let them do it, right? Why do we have to have the board involved in this?
Well, it is a board, we actually have to set how the election protocol goes as a board, and that is part of our responsibility, based upon following through the charter. Is that an accurate
Well, the
statement?
charter
Or the bylaws?
has the foundation for it, and then you can set some rules
Right.
related to it.
Somebody's got to be in charge. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not going to disagree with my colleague either, Jerry, or Debbie, or Lean, or anybody. I think the point's been made, though, no matter who you select, they will be perceived to have some baggage, and they'll be more of an unknown commodity, so anybody's going to bring some baggage to it. I think by the mere fact that the community has elected you people, they trust you, and they've empowered you. So, and you're a known commodity now, so you're not this unknown thing that'll create some paranoia, some baggage, or whatever it is. So I do think having the three that are not up for re-election, coordinating this and running it, I think is going to be your best, not best poor choice, but your least controversial choice, because you have been empowered, you have been elected, all those kind of things. The other thing I would say as we work on this, let's remember that only 25% of the people in the community vote. You know, we only have 1,000 homes basically that vote, and 3,000 people don't vote. So as we sit here and labor over the process and everything else, more energy should be put into how do we get more votes? How do we get a broader perspective from the community? That's almost a bigger challenge than anything else. But I would say that the three should probably do it. You're not going to find a right answer, but I think that's the best okay answer. Because I think anybody you select from here or anyplace else, we're all going to bring baggage, a lot of it.
Almost sounds like a volunteer to lead the committee.
No baggage there.
So I guess David is not up for re-election, and I think that's kind of where we went with maybe, we can talk, Mary Ann, David and I can maybe discuss this. All of the questions, though, are still something that needs to be kept within whatever committee it is.
Right, we've never shared the questions with the candidates, and
No.
all of you that are sitting up here have run before, and you know that you did not hear the questions until the night of the forums.
As they were being asked by the
Correct.
moderator.
Okay, so the call for candidates happens on 12/6.
Correct.
So if we're going to ask for questions on 12/6, when is the magic date when we need to know who the committee
I
is?
think you need to continue to allow questions to come in closer to around, it's usually the second week of February when you have your first forum. So
Right.
I would let the questions come in up until about a week before that, so that the committee has some time to put everything together.
My only concern is, and I'll be honest with you, just, the last time, there was like literally some controversy popped up, like just before the election. I don't
Right.
remember what it was, which is why.
Every year.
No, there was something else. But it was something else that just, it was an oddity. There's always that last minute, oh, wait a minute, what about this? And I would hate to have, so we just need to make sure that the committee is aware that even though we may end up we may end up putting an end at that particular date from the public, that the committee still needs to be aware of ongoing issues throughout that week.
I mean, what are you gonna do if you have 10 or 12 candidates and you've got 2 hours, 2 minutes a question. I mean, how many questions are you gonna get through? Remember, didn't we split up?
Well, we talked
I
about.
had a whole pile of questions that were still left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
The
certainly
problem
talked
is you
about that, yeah,
Yeah, you
was about
split,
splitting.
if you split the people up, then
That's-
you'd use the same questions for the next group, or?
Well, what ended
or
up
use
happening
different
though
questions?
is, enough people couldn't make it to one of the forums that we only did, and I think that was the year that you all ran. There was quite a few candidates that ran that year.
Like 14.
So enough didn't show up to where we were able to still have 2 forums, with everybody involved in those forums. So you almost have to play it by ear to see who, by January 6th, who declares candidacy and how many you have. Because we've had, election years where there was 4 for 3 seats.
We've also had elections that there have been, I think, wasn't there like, there was an astronomical number, but they didn't show up for the forums. So even though we had a large number that were running, they didn't come for forums,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I think if you can get your committee appointed now, we'll have another month or so, to kind of figure out the rest of
Okay.
the logistics from that.
So I
So-
guess we need to figure out
Do we,
though what
do we as a
wanna
board
do.
agree that we're empowering Vanessa, Mary Ann, and David to figure out the committee process, proceed with it? The other 4 of us are divorced from the process, and they will run with it and report back to the community as a whole on the big picture.
Do you
And then
want-
I'll be
do you-
taking one voice direction from those 3.
Do you
when it
want
comes to it.
independent people collecting the questions, or do you want the 3 board members to do it all?
I think you in your role as vice president are probably the, I mean, let's be honest, you're the vice president, you should be the point for this process. Mary
I
Ann
agree.
agrees. And I
I was
think,
thinking David is the former president and not running again.
I think we have a point person, it's you, and you, 3 of you need to make those decisions.
All right.
Fair enough?
That works for me.
Any last comments on this from the community? Gerald, did we at least fairly address the conversation and that you had brought up?
Questions are going directly to Vanessa.
Vanessa's going to make that decision with the other 2 board members.
They will go directly to me, and I will hold on to all of the questions, and then as the committee meets, we will then discuss all of the questions as a group, and then determine it as a group.
I can tell you in the past, all questions have come to me. Every question that's ever been submitted to me has been turned over to the moderator.
It has.
We can certainly set up a separate moderator email and have the moderator receive that separately, so you don't have to use your own personal email or.
Well, it's the
Just a
board,
separate
it's the board
for
email.
questions.
It's the board email.
And that
so
works
that's
too.
fine.
However you wanna do it,
That's
it's fine.
fine, the board email's fine,
You're-
that way it's all.
The 3 of you are
yeah.
empowered.
All right.
You've made my job much easier for the election
Perfect, yeah.
process.
Okay.
I'm more than willing to contribute more,
So do we need to
whatever the committee
vote
thinks
on that?
necessary.
Okay, so the motion that I will make is that Vanessa is the point person, and Vanessa, Mary Ann, and David are the board committee that will develop the election process in keeping with the conversation, which is recorded, so that everybody knows what's happening. And they'll give instructions to Steve, Susan, and others on the process, and report back to the community on the big picture. Do I have a second?
So, yes, whatever you need from me, yes.
Okay,
Second.
Mary Ann is the second, and Laura, you can watch the recording and word it perfectly. Any last board comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Perfect, passes unanimously.
And I just need to state that I have to step off, so I will be departing the meeting at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ann.
Thanks, Mary Ann.
So you guys are gonna wanna hang that up so you don't play
Yeah,
music.
but
Also,
When do
did
I
we already
put-
appoint PJ as the vote counter yet?
I don't think officially, if you wanna do that now,
Do
you
it
can
now.
do that. I know it's not on the agenda.
It's usually
question?
on the December agenda,
Oh, okay.
but we can do it at whenever you want.
I don't care.
What was the question?
PJ is interested,
Maybe
right?
PJ. She is.
I usually do December, I think she's already said she'll
She is.
well, yeah.
Mhm.
We can wait till December, that way
Okay.
it's
Okay.
actually noticed.
Okay,
Unless
item,
anybody has a
item
comment.
5, the 2019-2020 insurance renewal process. There's no information to share. The programs are effective December 7th. Mary Ann and Susan are meeting tomorrow, you're not meeting, or Mary Ann and Steve are meeting tomorrow with the agent. They'll have that conversation, and then materials will be shared with the board as a whole. We have a workshop on December 2nd, and we can do the approval then. We will need to raise any questions in the interest based upon what is shared. But, I mean, we went through a lot of work on the program last year's show. I think most of it should be in shape. Is that fair with the board?
And this includes the issue with the pools and the lifeguards, right?
It's insurance everything.
It's
Everything, this includes everything, yes.
Yeah, and then, so we have to send them all the events also that take place throughout the year.
And
So
remember,
that's
on the
all
Fidelity bond last year, we had raised it, but we probably should lower it this year because we
Right.
spent a bunch of money, so, okay. Fair enough with the board then? That's the game plan with insurance, so that takes care of that item. Okay, Charter Review Task Force update. Okay, come on up, and then Gary, we'll get to you next.
Eileen Barr. It's an insurance issue, it's a small insurance issue, but I have been concerned, along with others, about the goals that are still out in the 815, it's the 851
The fields?
fields next door. We had discussed, addressed this at the last Parks and Rec meeting, that I have a concern about equipment that does not belong to CROA, that we do not maintain being allowed to stay on CROA property. And in the end, that's an insurance issue and a liability issue, and maybe it should be addressed.
Is that school property? I think we
School
have an
property.
agreement,
But we.
but we have to
we
clarify
mow the yard.
the
maintain
details
it,
within that,
and
yes.
I believe we're giving permission for an entity to keep their equipment. But it's not just that equipment, it's any equipment, anywhere that we had people in our neighborhood who hung a toddler swing on a tree. So, and it's not CROA, but if somebody gets hurt on it, it's gonna.
It's the
be
new
responsible.
Artisan Park playground.
Yes, that's
The
what
answer
they-
is,
that was their answer.
we have got sued by Morgan & Morgan in the last year because a sprinkler head did not properly go down, and a woman said it caused irreparable damage to her little toe. So it's a fair comment that we should look at non-owned property, Susan. It's been brought up a time, and I think we ought to.
Nikki, can
Bring
you
it.
add that to the Recreation Committee discussion for Wednesday?
Who is that's using that space right now? Who is the entity that's
I
using?
don't know.
The space
The space
at,
next door.
it's, who is using it now? Baseball.
Flag football.
Okay. I guess I was always of the understanding that once the field's open, that was no longer gonna be that, but I could have made that up in my head.
No, I don't know. I think they grab anything they can.
I think soccer and lacrosse are primarily what are out at the fields, right? And then, so we have football and baseball that are out over at the fields
Baseball, I
adjacent
understand,
to the
yeah.
851 building.
That field. Yeah.
So,
I think any of our fields that are rectangular should just be labeled as rectangular fields, because they can hold multiple sports functions. They can
Hold on,
hold soccer,
We're talking
rugby.
about right next door.
you missed right here, we were talking about the field, the goals that are there, and the safety and insurance.
Non-owned property and insurance
Non-pro.
type exposures.
Yeah, but just, I want to make sure that they're not just for soccer, though. Flag football primarily holds all their games there.
Right,
They don't have any goals.
But the goals are soccer goals.
They are, yeah.
So the question is, which soccer entity is using that space right now or storing their soccer goals there?
Well, and the other thing that they're used
No,
for.
that's a
is-
question.
No, right now it's the youth soccer group, the Celebration Youth Soccer Group.
So
And they're-
Celebration Youth Soccer is using that instead of being on the ball fields?
No, I think
On the
the
complex?
mindset is that it's still an open field space as residents look for a place to kick a ball or to go just play
Yeah,
with
but
your
Celebration Youth Soccer is not residents just looking for a
No,
place to.
but I'm answering your question, though.
Okay.
The goals are still out there because we have quite a few people that show up and just kick a ball with their kid. It happens consistently.
That's not what's going on, Steve. I'm sorry. I mean, with all respect, there are organized activities, saw them over the weekend. The goals are out, there are tents up.
They do their signups right there.
There's a
yeah.
lot going on. So my question for you and for Nikki is, who's doing it and why, if it's Celebration Youth Soccer that we have an agreement with for the complex fields, how are they paying for these fields? And
Nick,
what's the
can you come up?
arrangement?
I think there are two different issues. And one is there's unauthorized use of the facilities that if we weren't aware of it, that needs to be addressed. So if they weren't rented, we need to find out why they were using it without renting them. But it doesn't negate the fact that there are plenty of parents kicking ball out there with their kids. I see it over and over.
I totally.
Can I change
Sure.
the question?
Yeah.
Whose goals are those?
The
They're-
youth soccer's, the Celebration Youth Soccer groups.
I think that, so that gets closer to the answer we're trying to
Yeah.
figure out.
Right.
Why
Cool.
are they there?
I've seen parents out with their kids.
Sure.
You know, a parent, 3 kids. That is very different than what I saw, you saw, maybe some other folks saw, which was a full-on event with fans, chairs, tents,
Right.
and lots of kids and coaches and whistles and activity. And it wasn't flag football, it was soccer. So what's
This weekend?
Last weekend.
If it
So what's
was
going on?
last Sunday, that was flag football.
No, I know the difference between flag football and soccer.
For soccer purposes, everyone's at the complex. So this event must have been, it wasn't booked through town hall, so I'll kind of work with the park monitors to determine, because they're the ones who are supposed to check the fields.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, though, if you had some dates and times of when this took place, so I can certainly look into see, because flag football did rent, they always do their skill challenge.
Okay.
Where they rent it out, and it has cones and those types of things, so it might have looked a lot like soccer.
But you don't need a soccer goal for
No,
flag football.
absolutely. No, so- No, Jackson, I understand.
The point has been made. All right.
But, so I guess if it's the will of the CROA board, we can ask them to just get their goals off of there completely. I think that there is definitely some value to having a place where there's some goals set up that someone can just come and kick it at no charge at all, because you can't go do that at the athletic field complex.
And how many goals would you think you need to do that?
Two would be appropriate.
And how
I
many
think.
are out there now, Nikki?
Sadly. There's roughly, probably 6 goals out there right now.
Out here?
Correct.
Right, and I'd just like to say, I have no opposition to having goals out there, but the goals need to be, they should be CROA, in my opinion, they should be CROA goals, they should be made by CROA staff, and the most important is that they have to be weighted and anchored and put away and locked so that people can't play on them. There are accidents and serious accidents every year with particularly kids playing around with particularly soccer goals and getting very serious injuries, so.
Just kids roughhousing and climbing on them and stuff like that, I get it.
Right, and,
Let's-
you know, if we can't stand behind them, there are lots of inflatable and easy-to-move soccer
Okay.
goals that parents can.
Let's
put
draw
on.
this one to a close. We've raised the issue, it was at the rec committee, it's been here. Let's get the research done, come back so that we get a resolution to this over the next 60 days.
The basis, though, was under, what are the implications for our insurance if they're not CROA goals? That was the implication. So we just need to follow up
Okay.
with the insurance. What happens if it is a non-CROA goal on CROA property?
If their goals are in good shape, youth soccer is willing to just donate them to CROA and sign them over, and they're anchored properly, would it be an objection of the board to have a couple goals remain on that field?
No.
Okay, and then the second point I think that we'll take away from this is that we will ensure that there's no unauthorized, organized use of those fields. They need to be booked, and they need to be insurance and everything else. And then anything that's just pick-up play, just kids going out there with their parents, will still allow.
Fine. Okay, but sometime in the next 60 days, we'll draw this to a conclusion, come back and resolve it, and put it to bed one way or the other. Okay. Gary?
Good morning. I'm Gary Hudspeth, speaking today as Chair of the Charter Review Task Force. I presented the final report in email to the board liaisons on the 7th of November, but today I'm just giving some highlights and answering questions. Today is the official presentation for the final report. I made a quick slide presentation to go over the details here, so if you'll go to slide 2. We had a total, the task force had a total of 30 meetings over a just under 6-month period. Next, please. We adjudicated 97 issues. 38 of those were from the list that the board liaisons gave us. This was a list of items that had come up at board meetings over the years, and it's sort of a running list of things to look at. And then, of course, we added to that based on public comment. From that, we have submitted a total of 52 proposed amendments to the bylaws and charter. 8 of them were categorized to be compliant with Florida statutes or had in some way connected to a Florida statute. 20 were proposed amendments initiated by homeowners, and 24 were in the category that we like to call CROA efficiency. things that would help us do our business better. All of these amendments only require a majority vote. In other words, if you're familiar with the charter, there are some amendments that would require a 2/3 vote. None of these fit that category. On the next slide, 4. So out of the 52 proposed amendments that would appear on the ballot, this is where the membership vote is required. At least 31 of those have already been adjudicated by written comments from the CROA lawyer, Mr. Tom Slayton. I say at least because there's really more, probably a handful more were nodded and approved by him in public discussion during our meetings. This helps us quite a bit because that means he's already reviewed them and provided language that is suitable that we voted on, so it makes the review even quicker. If you break it down by different documents, the charter has 27 amendments to vote on and bylaws have 32. Wait a minute, that's 59. That's because 7 of the amendments actually have impact statements on both documents. So there's really only 52, but 7 cover both documents. Over on the right side of the chart, you'll see administrative changes where no vote is required. This has to do with changes we made to obvious spelling errors, renumbering of paragraphs when we created a new paragraph, updating the list of service areas, that's a given, we don't have to vote on that. Minor language changing in both documents so that they would be compliant, and incorporation of one board-approved rule on porches about 5 years ago, and incorporation of one membership-approved amendment back in 2014 on the capital improvement assessment. So those are some of the administrative changes that would be documented in the document but don't require a vote. So the next page shows the 7 amendments that are in both documents in case you were curious. Do you desire any explanation? Okay. On the next actually, yes. On the next page, just for interest, I wrote down the 7 amendments that would be of interest to the Celebration Company. They received a document that I sent to the board liaisons that highlights specific areas that they'd be interested in, so they wouldn't have to go through the entire document, although I know they will, and just see what's there. You'll note that only 2 of them require a membership vote. Basically, we were correcting mistakes between the 2 documents that don't change any rights of the Celebration Company. We're just standardizing the language and putting in some definitions that were left out from years ago. The 2 that would require membership vote is you'll see bylaws 3.3B, voting by developer for a minority of directors. This is a Florida statute regulation, but the sentence that's already in the bylaws was a long run-on sentence that was very confusing because it commingled owners' votes with developers' votes and builders' votes, and it just got to be very long. So with a lawyer, I put a period and separated the 2 sentences into what the homeowners vote for, and then everyone else, meaning the Celebration Company, can vote for a minority number of directors. It's all legal according to 720. I just think it reads better now, and our lawyer, Tom Slayton, agreed. That change would require a membership vote, but it doesn't change the intent or the law or change any celebration rights. The other one that would require a membership vote is bylaw 6.3. There was a conflict between the bylaws and which takes precedence in the joint committee bylaws. Our bylaws contained a sentence that included the joint committee bylaws, which probably shouldn't be in there at all. So by removing that sentence, then we don't have to commingle our bylaws with the joint committees. It requires a membership vote, but legal's already approved that that was appropriate to take out. Any other questions about these items? These are the ones Celebration Company would be interested in. The next page, for deliverable, did I bypass? Yes. For deliverables, I forwarded these to the board liaisons on the 7th of November, so it's been 11 days ago, and hopefully, what's going on now, I'll get to that. What I submitted was the charter document and the bylaws document in the revision format with comments in the margin. A word about that, and I'm speaking to Steve now. This is the version that the board and TCC and the lawyer are looking at because it's got all the discussions, legal inputs, and the decisions of the task force. I do not recommend this be posted at all on the website because it also includes comments about proposed amendments that were not approved, but it's a record, historical record of why it was not approved. There's also comments about administrative changes. So it would be very confusing, I believe, for the general Celebration resident to read all of these. They would confuse and wonder, what am I voting on? There's a lot of things in here that don't pertain. This is an archive document that I intended to give you for the next charter review in 10 years. So I highly recommend that you save it to a disk or a separate file for future use. Now, by taking these two documents and deleting all the comments in the margin, what you are left with is the original two documents in the change mode by Florida statute, which means the added language is underlined and the deleted language is crossed out. That is the version that I would recommend that you put on the website for the public to view in preparation for the vote.
Can I just ask, since this is the point of that conversation, I think it probably makes sense once TCC's approved this and Tom Slayton's approved this, that Gary, myself, and Patrick sit down, we build the SharePoint or the forum page that we're gonna build. We put on the website everything that needs to go on the website, and then everything from the forum will link back to that website. And then what you see on the website is what residents will see as a ballot also. And then probably the quarterly report, or the four reports that you've given up to this point may be important.
Well, you're reading my mind because that's on the next slide.
Okay.
So let me go through the deliverables. We also, of course, I also sent the final report, not there yet.
Okay, still
Go
on
back
this
to
one.
deliverables.
Gotcha.
I also sent the issue sheets. This document is version 15 dated 6 November. This is a listing of all the proposed amendments, whether they were accepted or rejected or whatever, with with the decision by the Charter Review Task Force, the date it was done, and some discussion and legal input. So it is a record of everything that was accepted and rejected. This, I think, will be important for the future when people bring up, why did that happen? This will help explain why it did or did not get into the charter and the bylaws. It'll also provide a legal background for items that were not appropriate or illegal, and that's why they're not in there, but it's in here for future reference. I also provided a list of the 52 proposed amendments. This is the short version, just a summary, but it's cross-referenced with the tracking number as well as the reference paragraph in the charter or the bylaws. I'll get to that in a minute. And I, of course, sent you the final report, which looks like the interim report, except this is the final document, which I recommend that this be posted for, because like the interim report, it's a deliverable that should be publicly viewed. It's just a summary of everything we've done for the last 6 months. Separately, I submitted 2 documents specifically for TCC review. It is the same charter and bylaws that you received for archive, except in yellow highlight, it includes the 7 proposed amendments that TCC would be interested in. There's no difference in the document. It was just highlighted for easy for them to read. Now we're moving on to requested actions on page 8. The task force we would like to get a approval from the board and legal, and hopefully they've been reviewing this since the 7th of November, and legal has too, I hope, so that we can get an article into the Celebration News by December 5th. Is that the right time, or December 4th? For the magazine for January.
Oh, for January, yeah. The 5th.
Okay. We'd like to be able to write an article for the January magazine, and our deadline would be December 5th. So that's about 2.5 weeks from now. There are members of the Charter Review Task Force who specifically asked that we get back together after the legal review and the board views to go over any inputs, final comments, clarifications that legal put in. We'd like to look at the final document before it gets released to see if it still meets the intent of the task force. So our intent is to meet sometime in December to do this, but it depends on when you tell us when legal's done. And that goes back to what Steve was talking about. The task force also intends to create or review the ballot format along with a lawyer. We want something to look interesting and not just several pages of prose. We want to design a ballot, colorful, that looks like, I want to pick that up and read it. And we want to make sure that it
Well, if you're
is
looking to
appropriate.
get something like that from a lawyer, I think you're going to the wrong source.
Well, no, that's why we're designing the ballot.
Yeah, I know, just kidding.
Your task force intends to add some colorfulness to it. Next page there, Steve, sir. So moving forward from today, this is sort of a timeline I put together based on the final report. Right now, the CROA board, Celebration Company, and legal are reviewing the documents. The board liaisons told us that since we submitted it early, we might be able to get some feedback from you by this Friday, the 22nd. That's what we were told. We do have a December 5th deadline to get an article into Celebration News for January. And early January, there'll be a deadline for the February Celebration News. You approved earlier in a workshop back in September, we would like to mail a letter to all homeowners in early January. This is a separate mailing to talk about the charter bylaws vote, the amendments. We're proposing that we include the summary of amendments in this package. Not the individual wording, that would be pages. That's why we're putting the document on the website. Or what the lawyer thinks is appropriate. We have to follow Florida Statute 720, so we're waiting for him to figure out exactly what we're going to put in the January mailing. Also, in January and February, we encourage the board members to attend every single community event, whether it be the Bridge Club, Celebrators, Thriving in Place, whatever, to make an appeal to the owners to, remember that ballot you got in the mail? There's a reason we sent it to you, for the best effort for the community to update our documents. Please vote. Late January, the ballots get mailed out or emailed as appropriate. February 3rd, the voting opens. Remember, we also recommended and you approved, we would like to send out a postcard, which we're designing in February, to remind people voting is ending. So sometime in mid-February, we'd like that mailing. And then in March 3rd, the voting window closes. So that's our recommended things to do in the timeline. And finally, I'd like to thank, and so would the entire task force, all the homeowners who participated and provided inputs, the CROA board liaisons, Vanessa, Jackson, and Brian, legal staff from the CROA legal, Tom Slayton was very important and willing to meet with us and discuss things with us. The CCM staff, particularly Steve Waring and Susan Kearns, who attended quite a few of the meetings and provided background for us. And of course, the task force members, which is Kathy Van Tassel, Irene Barr, Greg Phillick, Bill Grindle, John McLaughlin, and Leslie Reynolds. Thank you for all your time. And with that, I'll leave questions for you if you'd like to talk about specific amendments or something that you've seen while you were researching.
Can I just quickly, before we start, Gary, you are uniquely fitted for this role. This is a monster task that required fine-tooth comb through every detail, and you were uniquely fit to do that. So thank you so much for your commitment to following through in the process with the letter of the law in mind. I mean, everything, there's literally I's and T's were dotted and crossed. and if they weren't in the document, they were after you went through it. So thank you very much. It's been a privilege working with you as well as with all the committee members. Eileen and Leslie were both here today, and we're in just about every single meeting, and there were weekly meetings for a long time, and they were long meetings. They were 2 to 3 hours. So thank you all for your time commitment. It was amazing. And I also appreciated the fact that when the board had some feedback for you with a direction or had insight, that you were very open and willing to listen to us. I hope that we also reciprocated and let you do your due diligence also. So thank you very much for your commitment.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good work, Gary. I'm laughing because over 6 months, you get to see how the sausage is really made.
It's not pretty.
Stay up here.
And thank you to the
Bounce it
management
down.
staff too.
Bounce
for
up one
coming.
page. Does anybody have any non-calendar questions for Gary? And then I had said the last time I wanted to talk about with calendar, which his calendar here is kind of perfectly weaves in with something I wanted to talk about.
My only, one note that I just took, I think you're requesting feedback by Friday.
I'll get
And
everything.
I think Vanessa's gonna
I've got
forward it all to me.
everything
I haven't seen
on,
anything yet,
including- yeah.
so I
Well,
can't.
you've had updates on everything.
Updates, but not the
You've had updates.
package.
Okay,
Yeah.
but please stay there.
Sure. Did you have any specific questions about any of the proposed amendments? We think they're in the best interest of the community. Certainly, there are 8 of them that, to be compliant with Florida statute, but we think all the others are logical and needed to be corrected over the last several years of community service by the boards and committees. It just seemed to be the right thing to do, all the ones that we were proposing.
Fine. 3 of us, Jackson, Vanessa, and myself, read them in painstaking detail over the course of the last 6 months, so I really don't have comments. I laughed about my sausage comment, but you got our comments in August and September and times like that. And I do appreciate, in all honesty, there was, like every other process, there's 90% of it was easy and 10% of it had a lot of pushing and shoving, and it got to a good answer. I thought the task force actually was extremely professional, and I was shocked at how they got done ahead of schedule. So for that, I have total kudos. So let me talk about some calendar stuff and see if the board agrees. So 11/22, if you got any comments, go with God, but I'm assuming 3 of us are sitting here, having been through the process, saying, we're happy. If somebody else has a major league issue, please scream quickly. We have a workshop on 12/2. What I was hoping to do in that workshop was charter review conversation and approval by the board saying it works. And I could easily see that taking an hour.
I'm hoping that before we have to have legal before we can do.
Well,
yeah.
and please chase Tom.
Well, TCC is the big one, because we gave it to him way ahead of time.
Yeah,
And
you and I need to
so-
follow up with Paige.
Exactly.
I'm
I
just-
talked with him briefly last week, he's like, I got everything.
Okay.
Good.
I'm like,
We'll follow up. Okay, so 12/2, I was thinking charter revision, the insurance program approval, because it's effective 12/7. I'm not thinking that's a lot of time, but that's the day we need to approve it. And then the chorus. So we had the thing from Cindy Swisher on the chorus, which I don't think is complicated, but those 3 things on 12/2. 12/18, we got a board meeting, which will be normal board-type items.
Do we
You
have a
won't
quorum?
be
Do
here.
we have a
We will
quorum?
have a quorum because Vaughn and I are back on the 17th, and we're in between the two holidays, so life is happening. Then you go to the workshop on January 6th. And what I was thinking on January 6th is we've got the UCF with David Mitchell, which Jackson and I met with him, and Steve, sorry. That's probably an hour. We've also got a workshop on 120, and we need to get to the Parks and Facilities Plan conversation. I think when we really get to it, we need to talk about priorities. We had the conversation earlier today, and stuff like that. We need to make decisions, I think, in early January, or start laying out quickly how quick can we get to decisions. So I was thinking that for January 20th. Plus, we need to be finalizing between the 6th and the 20th what the ballot is going to look like for the charter. We've got the other stuff going here, so I'm really thinking in January, we got three major issues: Parks and Facilities, the ballot stuff, and the UCF. So that's,
Ballot needs to be prepared before then.
well, it needs to be prepared, but it needs a final board vote saying it's good to go and any feedback on it.
Right, no, I understand that, I'm just wondering, is that too
That
late?
should be January 6th.
Okay,
Okay.
Because it needs to go out February 3rd.
All right, then
That's what I
put,
thought,
then
yeah.
put the ballot on January 6th with the UCF, and then January 20th we'll dedicate to Parks and Facilities and prioritization.
The only
Is that-
thing with the ballot, you're talking about the ballot for the charter review, right?
Right.
Because you won't have all your candidates, they have to the end of that day to declare candidacy.
Yeah, we're talking, with the ballot
The
on
ballots-
January 6th, we're talking about the charter
charter,
ballot. That's what we're talking about.
Mhm.
The other ballot, you have got a normal process, I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
And January 20th, we focus on the Parks and Facilities Plan and prioritization. So is that a fair agenda for the next 2 months, realizing Thanksgiving and Christmas is just what it is, and that rolls into January?
Can we get a clarification, are we or are we not having a board, workshop on December 16th?
December 6th?
It's on the calendar, but I don't think we have a quorum.
You won't be here,
I'm not
Vaughn
here,
won't
you're
be
here.
here, I
I'm
won't
not
be
here.
here, so.
We don't, what do you still?
I'll be here.
I should be here.
Was there anything that
I was
we're
like, yeah, for a
missing over what
workshop.
you've already
That's the reason I took it off my
Yes.
calendar, that's why I missed that one.
Yeah, do we want to just cancel that board meeting, or that workshop?
Yes.
You good with that? I mean,
It's up to you.
I think without 3 of our 4 officers here, that's, I mean, I could take over the world, but I don't think we should.
workshop is,
Cancel it.
workshop is something just to kind of talk about anyway, and if you
Yeah, but
only have.
if we've got
okay.
3 of our members, 4 of our members, well, 3 of our members gone, we're not really having the full conversation.
Okay.
So in my mind,
So cancel the 16th? Okay, take care of that.
We'll send a cancel.
Is that a fair plan? Anything else other than that? Any comments from the audience before we have a motion to adjourn?
Well, Gary needs
Oh,
questions.
Gary may have something else,
So,
and then Mike
no,
will give you.
Good schedule, but I need some clarification. You think we'll have legal and TCC feedback by Friday or
By the
later?
I would not hold my breath on
Okay.
TCC.
All right.
He's
It
just
is-
out of town until
Exactly.
Thursday, I believe.
Is he?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right.
So, no, he has the document, which means hopefully, he's, yeah.
Send it to the lawyers.
Well, he was doing, I know he was gonna send off the pertinent things off to his legal.
Yep.
Um,
So here's what I'm looking at. If December 5th is the deadline to get an article into the January Celebration News, we'd like to write something that's already, like you see already, but we'd like to expand with JR's permission. If you have no problem with the 52 proposed amendments, we'd like to ask if we could put in the short summary of the 52 proposed amendments, or do we need to wait until?
I think we need to wait till, if we have legal and,
It's December, in other words, I'd need it by, what's your meeting? December 2nd. By the December 2nd workshop, would you have
I can
everybody's
reach
approval?
out to both Tom Slayton and to Paige to see if we can have it back by the 2nd.
If you can get
how
it
many
by,
pages would you expect this to be? It seems like an awful lot to put in the magazine.
well, it is, and that's why I'm looking at JR. If we put in the
Yeah,
short summary
that's,
of just the short summary, not the actual language, we're looking at the better part of 4 pages without ads.
I think it's even a bigger issue than that, is that something that we want out? I mean, it does go to people that aren't just residents too, not that I'm
Right.
opposed to having it publicized.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I
I'm in
guess,
favor of that, but
are you?
I am.
Okay, I'm willing to hear it out, I don't,
I
yeah.
think that's a media that we use most common to reach out to our residents for notice. We have along this process as a whole. It's
We
a
are.
lot of information.
Of course, remember in early
Yeah.
January, we're going to be making a dedicated mailing to every resident
Right.
with the same information. It's your choice, if you think the mailing will cover it, or do you want to back that up with a Celebration News article that contains that much information?
Well, let's,
What about it, JR? If we had 4 pages, would the publisher have a heart attack or something, or is that something that's pretty doable, or, I mean, that's,
or would it just cost?
4 pages of text will probably expand to 5 or 6 once you start adding some graphics, because you're gonna have to break that up.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, it may involve cutting back on some other things that may not be time sensitive, just because that, like I said, that'll be 5 or 6 pages, so that'll cut into something.
It's probably the single most important thing you're doing next year, so there are some other things that we could look at eliminating and
We
replacing.
we could wait till February.
That's when people are voting.
It's still the same problem, it takes up space.
Yeah.
But there's an option, we still want to put an article in the newspaper, in the Celebration News that describes the process. That's your typical 3/4 to a page like you've seen recently. But in one of the 2 issues, would you consider putting in the summary of the 52 proposed amendments, January or February?
I think I don't think it's a bad thing to do that. I guess it's just an issue of if it's, because like I said, it doesn't.
I don't want to end up in a situation where we don't get adequate vote turnout because we
Yeah.
didn't do enough.
Right.
That's my
Yeah.
thought process, so.
I'm fine with it.
Whether it's January or February is a great question. February might be the one, because that'll show up on January 31st, that they see it, it means them they're going to be voting.
And when do the mailings drop?
Well, we haven't determined that, it's up to the staff, but I'm hoping for the first full week of January.
You're talking about
Okay.
the mailing of the magazine or the?
No.
at
No,
separate-
The letter.
mailing of all the information, because I think if you do one, then you follow it up with another, or you do one or the other, then you have it covered in 2 different
They did
months.
February
I
because
actually
we
think
get more
February
input.
magazine is better because they'll have the mailing in mid to late January. and then
Candidates will
it's
be in
followed
there
up
too,
again.
right?
Candidates will be there.
Okay.
That'll be a huge issue with candidates plus
Yeah.
this in February.
It'll be the voting magazine.
Yeah, it will.
I think that's okay.
And that's,
But can
Would
we
it
get all that
be-
in February?
Is the concern of everybody the space that it takes up? Is that, what's the higher concern, if you will?
space,
I'm not-
mind space.
For me,
And
this-
validity to the public.
when you put it out, I'm not sure people are gonna read it. 52 items is a lot to absorb, even if it's a sentence or 2 sentences or a paragraph. If we're just trying to say we're putting it all out there so you can see it, okay. But if we're actually trying to convince people to get engaged and vote, I think there are a lot of other things that could be done that probably have equal or better.
Well, I think we're going to be doing all of them.
Yeah,
Allow me-
so, I mean, I like the idea of us going out and lobbying and talking to people.
I like that. Allow me to follow up, though. If space and overwhelming, the community, perhaps we go ahead and split it and do 26 in January, 26 in February. Of some items, you're going to receive a mailing with more information, and here's a follow-up. And explain due to space, so you can digest it, but the
There are
last thing I
gonna be
want to
s-
do is say that we're not pushing the information to the community.
There could be value in splitting it when I think about it, because there are certain issues like the change in term limits and the request for proposal and stuff like that, which will generate conversation. And if they were there in January, it'll allow people to see them, there will be other things of the 52 that Gary's already talked about that are more streamlined, straightforward, that people aren't going to get as.
But we're getting all the owners, though, I think it's important we remember that all the owners are getting everything in January, including the whole sheet, correct? The whole, all the 52 issues.
Right, but it'll be
Mail
the
it.
summary of issues,
Right.
not,
Right.
well, it's,
Which-
whatever Tom
Yeah,
Slayton
but-
tells us is legal.
It might make sense if the board's in consensus that we put it in the magazine, let's let Gary and JR discuss logistics,
I
what makes the most
like that,
sense,
'cause
and then.
remember, as much as we beat the Parks and Facilities Plan to death, we got 750 votes. So, I mean, that is really what we're trying to do here, is get the vote out. And we need every organization in town reminding people this is important.
I'd like to get the vote out. Recall the last town hall meeting we had just 3 weeks ago, one resident, the lady stood up and asked, "What's on there? I don't even know."
And we're still gonna get it, beyond a
Yeah.
shadow of a doubt. So over-communicating is probably good. You and JR sit down and figure out a strategy for January and February.
But what I'm looking at, of course, is I need to get feedback by the 2nd of December from TCC, the board, and legal, so that we can finalize whatever we publish, because once it goes to the publisher, it's too late to yank it out.
Would splitting it assist? For example, the January issue has the legal required items as part of it, so there's 8 right there, that you always know right out the gate that has to go out there and nobody's going to change that.
I think,
Anything that's critical on TCC or what have you could be the February issue. And that gives you a couple extra days.
And if they sit down and talk about it, they can look at, JR knows what else is coming in for January and February, and then, because if,
Just
you can determine
figure out how
whether
to
they all go
manage it.
together or split.
I think it would be, I think my personal preference would be not to split it and just do it once, because you're still gonna be doing a task force article. I mean, you still,
Yes.
yeah, you're still doing that.
Yes.
Which that was a certain number of pages. in the
Exactly,
past.
so,
One
yeah,
page.
so it's just, I think it's important that we just, I would like to not see it split up, because I don't wanna confuse people thinking, oh, we only have 24 issues, and they somehow miss the other one, and then all of a sudden they go, wait a minute, these are 52 issues, what are they talking about? Why didn't we see this?
As long as we inform them right off the bat and express, hey, there's a lot of information, it's coming between these 2 issues. And don't limit ourselves to the number, because who knows, maybe it's a couple less.
Does it
for the
make
February
sense
issue.
to the board, though, that if we try our best to get it all into one, and if we can't get it into one, then we talk about the strategy for splitting it and making sure people understand why it's split?
Yes, and I'm good
I'd be
with
in favor
Gary,
of that.
and I'm good with Gary and JR working that out.
If we decide to put it all in one issue, I'd be leaning toward the February issue, gives JR more time.
And the letter goes out in
And
January.
the letter is going to go out in
I
January
agree.
with the legal language requirement that Tom Slayton will be putting together with us.
I have, okay, but just for one item, just for clarity, I have no doubt we'll get Tom Slayton's review done by December 2nd. And I
Okay.
have no confidence that we'll have TCC feedback by December 2nd, and we're just going to
Really?
have to make a business decision, because it's not spelled Star Wars and sell a what, and, we're just, we've got a risk here, and I don't think there's any, we've communicated galore, and I don't know what else we can do.
So these deadlines have been shared with TCC, and the reason
Well-
why we have this deadline?
They do know, yes, but sometimes the things that, like he, and even pages like, this isn't even me, this is if
Right.
my attorneys are like, okay, if it doesn't have Star Wars on it, I don't have time, because that is their moneymaker. This is not making them any money.
Yeah, no, that's.
Which is why we've tried to
Which is what I
streamline it,
use.
why he's made
Exactly.
change mode, why we've tried to make it as easy as humanly possible.
Yeah.
But we're still,
I would encourage
But
that
they-
we reach out yet again and express
I
the
will.
date.
well, she reached out last week
I
even.
reached out last week.
And
Yeah.
Keep on.
we've kept banging, I mean, I'm just being honest.
There's no requirement for them to have to review that. So I think that if they don't care, they'll come back and tell you, we're fine with it the way it is.
That's what I think too, but that they're gonna look at the couple of the items. I don't think that they will hold us up.
We're probably gonna proceed and pray. Mike?
My comment was, why not start working partial possibly with the Friday flash and pull it into an executive summary form and start to talk about it? It doesn't have to be definitive and absolute, but here's what's coming, here's a list of 8 that are in this category, whatever, start to spoon feed people now. I think the sooner you start this, the better chance you have of getting
That's-
full. I would start that as quickly as possible.
That's already in our report, and it has been interim reports since since June. We want to start incrementally feeding this into the Friday flashes, but we decided to wait until January because people are not interested in reading that in December with the holidays coming up. That was our decision.
The worst situation would be that nobody read it in December. The best situation would be some people did read it in December. I would give it an opportunity to get likes.
Well,
And December magazine is too late at this point.
Oh, of course.
So
Yeah.
that's why
Well, but he already-
January,
yeah,
I'm
he already
pushing for
has-
January.
yeah. But he already has-
Overwhelming with everything in one spot. You've got
Even if it was just the legal
summarize this,
requirements.
executive
We,
summary, whatever it is.
we intended to introduce this into the Friday flashes every week, January, February, and the first week of March. If the Friday is in March, I don't
March
recall,
3rd
I
or
guess
2nd.
not. But we didn't want to, even the December issue, which will be coming out in a couple of weeks, doesn't have much more than what you've already seen in the November issue, because we haven't got all the legal input yet. It's just another revision. Here it comes, here's a few items that we've already adjudicated.
If we build that form after the December 2nd approval, we can put the final document on there, we can put the 4 quarterly updates on there, and then the Friday flashes can start pointing people back in that direction.
That's true, too.
Because it's all up there, and we want people to start getting on there, and then they can have some conversation on there, they can ask some questions, they can be answered.
Yeah.
I like that. Point to the document after we get it all cleaned up
Right.
from all the inputs.
Yep.
Right.
I like that.
Still pull rather than push. They've got to do something rather than pushing.
Well, we're gonna
It could
start,
be-
Collecting no
Put a link in there, can't you?
We can link back to it, but I mean, to Mike's point, and we can put a few teasers and say, hey, if you want the full thing, here's where it is, and.
Okay. Yeah, we've been writing that.
Okay.
All right, so for the January issue, well, we'll see this on December 2nd and put together something. I've already got a draft. I'm just waiting for the final decision.
Okay. Any other comments on anything? Any other comments from the audience? Motion to adjourn? We got a motion from Kevin and a second from Vanessa. All in favor? Yes.
And we'll see everybody in 2 days, right?